And to the analysis of Shields and Brooks, that is syndicated columnist Mark Shields and New York Times columnist David Brooks. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So today's jobs report, 227,000 jobs created in the month of February. The White House says this is an encouraging sign. Mark, what do you make of it, and what effect on the presidential campaign?
The White House is right. It is encouraging news. It's sustained encouraging news, Judy. Add to the fact, as Diane mentioned to Ray in the earlier segment, 61,000 additional jobs for the previous 2 months. So it's been a good record. It is not breaking the back of unemployment. It's not Bill Clinton's 22 million jobs in 8 years, but it's certainly a significant improvement, the best since 2006. And it, for the Republicans expecting to run on the economy, it's just sand in their gears.
Does it make it harder for the Republicans to run on the economy?
Yeah, my colleague Andy Lowry has a rule, which is if the job number is $200,000 or 200,000 jobs a month more, that's good for the Democrats. More like 100,000, that's good for the Republicans, and then 150 sort of in the middle there. So that's good, because at 200,000, you're beginning to reduce the unemployment rate over time. And so this is clearly good. Also interesting, the psychological effect, even beyond the job creation numbers, the fact that people are re-entering the labor force, the fact that people are starting to quit jobs, assuming and being somewhat confident they can get another job. That's a sign of a broader psychological effect. So without question, good news. The only lingering question is the wages are kind of flat, as we heard. And then will this be sustained? Usually when you have job creation rates at this amount, you have really strong growth, 3 or 4%. But our growth, the projections are like 1.8 or 2%. And so if the GDP growth is that slow, it's hard to see us sustaining this level of job growth. Those projections could be wrong, and we could have it. But a lot of economists think we may have hit a little lull there.
And Mark, there's still gas prices going up, which have to factor into people's ability to pay their bills every month.
Yes, I mean, politically, I think the best note was struck by Alan Kruger, who's the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors. He said, this is an economy on the mend. There was nothing triumphalist or nothing self-congratulatory about it. It is very much, as I think David put it, an economy on the mend. The gas prices are real, Judy, and it's been cushioned somewhat by the sustaining of the payroll tax cut and by low energy costs in this very mild winter. So people have probably a couple of extra bucks, but it's going to start feeling, and it looks that gas prices are going to continue to go up. And that is a problem. It became a problem politically yesterday when the president, the Keystone Pipeline, he had to scramble to get stop the number of Democrats defecting to support the Republican position, which is basically a jobs and gas prices vote to limit it to 11. So I think that was a direct reflection of gas prices.
And then you have the debate, David, where the president, or on one side, the argument is there's only so much the president can do about gas prices, and of course the Republicans will argue there's a whole lot more the president should be doing.
Right, and he's more or less right, though I do agree with the Republicans. The decision not to build the Keystone Pipeline was an insane decision. I mean, it didn't do anything for the environment, and it did hurt jobs. And so would that have an effect on gas prices before the election? Absolutely not. There's very little the president can do short term. The final thing to be said on gas prices is that as you talk to people who talk about the Iran situation, what happens if there's an Iran contretemps? I heard the quotes from very well-informed people that gas prices would leap to $8 a gallon. And that might not be long-term, but that would just send a tremendous shock through the economy and through the psyche of the American people.
Well, let's talk about the Republican primary, the Republican contest, Mark. Super Tuesday is behind us. Mm-hmm. We're now into March. What does it look like? Mitt Romney had a good showing on Tuesday, but he hasn't put away the competition.
I had an epiphany about Mitt Romney. Okay, I think Mitt Romney have won 6 out of 10 races. If you're giving him his report card, you'd say he's A- in arithmetic because the math is very much on his side. He's D in chemistry because he just is not connecting. All right, I think it's time for Mitt Romney, Judy, just to say the following: look, I don't make your heart beat. I don't put a step, sort of a life in your steps, and I'm not gonna be the heart throb that you've always wanted to give you an emotional lift or anything of the sort. What I am is I am an incredibly dependable and competent person. I will be a great steward of this nation's economy. I have no vices. I'm a good family man, and this is who I am. I'm not going to be touchy-feely, and he shouldn't try to be. Today in Mississippi, he stood up and said, "Hello, you all." Supposedly at the
Talked about
suggestion-
eating cheese grits.
Yes, and I mean it just is not. It's synthetic and counterfeit, and it doesn't work.
Is that what he needs to do?
I think it would be a starter. You remind me, as you were speaking, of a speech Mark Halperin, the great novelist, wrote for Bob Dole when he started his campaign, which was, "I'm not the flashiest guy in the world, but I'm regular and dependable." And it would be authentic because he is not a heartthrob. The other thing I would say he needs to do is he needs to get on offense to actually control the debate, to actually get some arguments started. And the coverage today of his campaign was about saying howdy y'all or whatever he said, and then he stomped on a cockroach. And so that was the coverage. And that's partly because we're trivial and we like to cover trivial things, but partly because he wasn't actually offering anything to talk about. And that's been a perennial theme of his campaign, doing the same thing over and over again, not controlling the discussion with something you're actually offering.
What should he be talking about?
Well, I mean, I think he should be talking about things like entitlement reform. He could come up with a job program of the day. He could pick a fight about anything, have some policies on education, on families. There are a million things to talk about in the country, but he's got to have something new each day, something that begins to have an argument.
Well, meanwhile, Mark, he has Rick Santorum and Newt Gingrich nipping at his heels. Now, the Romney camp says it's just about mathematically impossible. You mentioned arithmetic a minute ago, for them to catch up. Is that right? That it's just about
yes,
impossible?
I mean, the argument is there that it becomes very, very tough for them. I think it becomes almost impossible for Gingrich. His own campaign has said he has to win both Alabama and Mississippi on Tuesday. If he's even going to be a regional candidate, which would then give him South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. But Gingrich does make one point about Romney that I think is valid and it deserves Romney's attention, and that is Romney has beaten Rick Santorum in both Michigan and Ohio by outspending him at a minimum of 4-1. And Gingrich points out you're not going to have that kind of luxury advantage against Barack Obama in the fall. That this is a weakness of Governor Romney's campaign. He just can't go in and outspend and just dominate the airwaves that way. So I think that Santorum is pushing hard, and understandably, to win one of those two states. And if he does,
Mississippi or Alabama.
Mississippi,
next
Alabama,
Monday,
and
Tuesday.
And if he does, I think it makes it tough for Gingrich to go forward. He is in a position, one-on-one with Romney, to be at least competitive. And I think most measures are saying that he'd get at least a majority of Gingrich's vote, and that Romney would not.
But it doesn't look like either one of them is going to get out anytime soon.
Well,
right?
there are a lot of conservatives right now who are holding fire on Gingrich, who are getting, okay, he deserves next Tuesday. But if he loses one of those two states, then I think you'll see a wave of people, not even just Republicans, but really quite conservative people saying, I knew you had your chance, we got to have a one-on-one. And I was thinking with the good economic news, a lot of Republican voters might say, we may not win anyway, let's go with the guy we really believe in. And Santorum could have an advantage. Now, the Romney people are right. It's very hard to see how Santorum gets the delegates. But a guy named Sean Trend at Real Clear Politics did a very good analysis saying it's possible to see how Romney doesn't get the delegates. It doesn't mean Romney that Santorum gets them, but Romney could do about as well as he's been doing in state after state and still fall 75 delegates short by the time of the convention.
Meaning you get to the convention and nobody has.
Right, and presumably the party would sort of heave him over the top. It's hard to see somebody else getting it, but it would certainly not be a sign of strength.
Judy, one point that I think bears mention here, and that is Newt Gingrich in Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Oklahoma, Tennessee, and what was the third southern Georgia. Last Tuesday. His campaign was outspent by his super PAC 70-1. 70-1. The super PAC has become the substitute for the campaign, for the party, and everything. As long as you've got
Oxygen.
one angel with deep pockets and wants to be a kingmaker or believes devoutly in you, can keep you going. Historically, when votes dried up, your money dried up. But that's one of the problems the Republicans are going through right now. It's totally disconnected to any electoral reality. And so that makes it tougher for Romney as well, that these guys can hang around, even though, I mean, Santorum's done pretty well and won a number of primaries, but Gingrich, by historical standards, should long be gone from the race.
That'll be a permanent feature of politics from now on, as long as Citizens United is there.
Only a minute or two left, but David, a lot of talk this week about the women's vote and whether the Republicans have done some long-lasting damage to themselves with all this talk about birth control, contraception, turning many women off. How do you see that?
I really don't think so. I think women are as divided as men on a lot of these social issues. There are a lot of pro-life women, a lot of pro-choice women. There has been historically generally a bit of a gender gap, though in some elections it's disappeared. And so I assume that'll be there. But I don't think there's a women's position on a lot of these issues. And so I expect the gender gap will be about what we've seen in past elections.
Which is unmarried women tend to favor Democrats, married women tend to favor Republicans, although more women were with the Republicans in 2010.
But President Obama carried women by 13 points in 2008. I mean, they were key to his election. And the difference is it's between unmarried women and married women. John McCain carried married women in 2008.
How do you see this? Do you see Republicans doing?
I think Republicans. I think they were ill-served by the hearings on Capitol Hill. Darrell Issa committee lined up 6 males to comment and to be witnesses on the subject of contraception. Once it switched, Judy, from a debate about religious freedom to a question of contraception, I think the Republicans were in terrible shape. I think that Rush Limbaugh hurt the Republicans, quite honestly, when he equated anybody seeking contraceptive aid as being a slut or a prostitute. There's very few people in the country who don't have a close relative who's on contraceptive medication.
You see this dying out as an issue?
Well, I think the contraception, it's tough to see anybody fighting a campaign on contraception. And just quickly on Rush Limbaugh, I'm not sure people really see him as a Republican. I don't think there's ever been historical evidence that he's swung a lot of votes. People see him as a conservative movement / entertainer guy. I'm not sure people see him as the center of the Republican Party.
I think Republicans have treated him with a respect and a deference. A lot of Republicans seek his approbation. It's almost, I don't want to say like a papal audience, but I mean, they're thrilled to be mentioned by. He did go after John McCain. It did not deprive McCain of the nomination.
We're thrilled to have the two of you, Mark Shields, David Brooks. Thank you.